Bosh! Oh my god! It's me. Let's talk about an awful movie.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, people, and welcome back to another Lost the Plot video. This will be our third video by now, and by the title you probably already know what it's about. It is going to be based on Batman.
Yes.
Absolutely not. Okay, it's going to be based on Spider-Man No Way Home, and as the title suggests, everything wrong with it. It's not going to be a slander video. It might turn into that, but we are going to try and talk about the positives about it as well. This is a general review of this film. We thought it deserves one video because there are a lot of things that we, as a foursome, can talk about. Okay? And again, like we always say, if you want to cry about it, feel free, but do it in your own time. Don't waste hours.
Yeah.
Lovely. Right?
Because we're going to waste yours.
Yeah, because we're wasting yours now. Okay, we can't be dealing with any more. Right, very apt segment for today's video. We'll start, as we always do, start with James's unpopular opinion.
The original Spider-Man 2 from the Raimi trilogy is my least favourite of all the Spider-Man films. I hate it. It's so boring. So boring. Just stop saying it's the best.
Before you kick off this video, it's the best one. Ignore it.
No, it's
I'm going to say that's a starting point if I've ever heard one. But
What do you think of Spider-Man 2 then? Because it's my favourite of the originals anyway. Might be my favourite overall, to be honest.
With the Raimi trilogy, it's the same things that annoy me. I don't like Kirsten Dunst
Oh, God, no.
at all.
No.
So if she was not in it, that would be better.
Yeah, but you can't have that. She's
I really like, no, you're correct. I really like Dr. Octopus. Alfred Emilia's brilliant. I disagree with James 100%. I don't think it's the worst movie. I think Spider-Man 3 is absolutely diabolical.
no question.
Yeah. And Amazing Spider-Man 2.
I disagree with that statement.
Okay.
If you take, we'll probably go on to this. If you take the villains out of the film, it's very good. The story and Andrew Garfield's relationship with Emma Stone's fantastic.
Yeah.
But I disagree with your statement.
I just because of how daft the third one is, I actually enjoy that more because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The second one just bored me just completely.
I was young when Spider-Man 3 still, I was still at the age where I should have been enjoying Spider-Man 3. A movie like that. And even then, because I don't know, it was like after that point where you were getting I think it was from then you were still getting some of the trailers come through for things like Transformers, and then it started off that new sort of
because that was brilliant
stage of those kind of stupid movies. So at that point, for stuff like that to attract my attention of that age, but then Spider-Man 3 was just damp, even though it was the most over the top stupid shit you've seen at that point.
For the record, I don't like Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, we went.
But I'm not really a big fan of the Raimi trilogy as it is anyway.
I agree with that statement.
I just like the first
That's
one.
again though. You should.
Sorry, Tom. There's a lot of frowning going on at this end of the table.
Does he want to just build that power to then destroy someone?
I'm not overly defending the Raimi trilogy like some people do. I'm not nostalgic towards it because I never watched it as a kid other than the second one, which you can say I'm a bit biased towards it a little bit. But when you objectively look at the second one, in my opinion, I think it has such a good, relatable, threatening villain that's acted superbly. I think because it's not an origin story, it doesn't have to deal with any of that comes in with all Spider-Man films. It has that advantage of being able to tell its own story quicker. And I haven't watched it in a while, so it's hard to think on the spot about exactly what's good about it. I just know it's one of my favourite Spider-Man films.
Yeah.
You've summed it it sums it up sort of in the politest possible way. But I think one of the things I draw from that is the fact that as a movie, it does sort of demonstrate what the whole trilogy was trying to do, but it does it in one. It's not crazy enjoyable, and I did see it fairly recently. I was glad I had that, especially before stuff like watching Spider-Man No Way Home. I thought it was sort of like, I was glad I had that refresher, because otherwise I would have gone in with these sort of just like vague memories in my head, and I'd have just gone, oh yeah, this is what I think about this.
Right. Yeah. A very apt, unpopular opinion to start with. One that I think we all disagree with.
And it will probably keep coming back into this.
Yeah, it will. Yeah. And we say this video is based on Spider-Man No Way Home, which it will be, but we will also bring in the other Spider-Man films for the obvious reason, spoiler alert, that the other Spider-Man are in this film. Okay? So, shall we crack on, gentlemen?
Indeed.
Right. I know this person, and sorry, just to clarify, we didn't say this. If that wasn't obvious, we don't talk about what we're going to say before we sit down for these videos. We didn't know that that was going to come out of James's mouth. Matt definitely didn't from his reaction. And again, the points that we're going to make in this video, we have not discussed. We have not talked about them. So we're not entirely sure what's going to happen. So we will mediate it as best we possibly can, because Matt and James might end up scrapping at some point throughout this video. And to be fair, you might want to scrap us by the end of this anyway from the things we're about to say. But like we said, cry about it in your own time. Thank you. Right, James, let's start with you then, because I know that you have a very strong opinion of this film.
I'm quite intrigued to hear what he has to say, because I do have things where I disagree about the film, but it's not to the level that brings it down as far as you've brought it down, so I'm quite intrigued to hear what you think.
I think out of the four of us, James is the most adamant that this film is terrible.
It is awful.
Yeah.
Do you know what? When I saw the trailer first, and I saw that they were bringing back all the villains from the other trilogies, and I thought, oh Christ, here we go, they're dropping in the whole multiverse thing straight away. I was like, I just didn't want to see that straight, like, so far. It seemed way too early to be dropping that in. And then watched the film, and for about a week I was like, do you know what? Fair play. That was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. It still panned out exactly what I expected in the long run. But at the end, like, I don't know, after about a week or two, like, letting it mull over, I was like, hang on. Apart from the whole spectacle of it, like, it wasn't actually that good a film. It was nothing different from what we've been getting from Marvel. Everyone's talking about it as if it's like this big game changer, like,
or was talking about.
Well, yeah, like when
really all over the place at the minute.
Yeah, when you got Infinity War and Endgame, and they were like just these massive events. It's just being talked up like it's one of those, and it's really not. It's not any different to any of the other sort of general.
I think that's one of your problems is the fact is that. And they tripped themselves up, because they're going to, with that kind of connected universe that they're going for, it's those event type movies, and that's where you're going to get these. If you tip too much on this, it's literally just a moment, it's this spectacle, that's all it becomes.
You can't have Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire come back and it not be an event to some people.
Yeah.
So that comes with it.
That's what I mean in terms of but that's the worry of it, and that's the pressure almost that it has to hold itself to.
Like this links to Spider-Man, but it also links to Marvel and DC and other franchises in general. Has Marvel, with Infinity War and Endgame, created this idea that everything needs to lead to a big event now? Yeah. Because I feel like with Spider-Man, there was 2 films that were brilliant, developed the character of Spider-Man superbly, growing up through his stages, getting comfortable with his abilities and who he was as a person, fantastic. And then for the last one, they've gone, we'll go away from that.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do now is create a nostalgic hype fest that's this big event, because everything needs to lead to something that's major.
I would like to disagree that it doesn't develop Tom Holland's character, because I feel like it does. I feel like the first 2, he's got support basically from, he's been mentored into Spider-Man and how to become Spider-Man. This one, he stands alone on his own pretty well, I think. Obviously Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield come back, but it feels like he's learning the responsibility of having to become Spider-Man and how to do it and try and keep his like live his life at the same time, and I feel like he knows it's hard to do that in this film, and I feel like this film really advanced to me Tom Holland's Spider-Man in my opinion. Because of that.
I agree with you in the sense that it does develop the character a bit, but is the main focus on that like it has been in the last 2 films?
I'd say yes.
You would?
Yeah.
I
This
disagree.
is where I actually agree, but I think proportionally that the character.
I disagree.
The finale's done and these guys go back home, it goes back to his personal life and it ends on how that affects him.
But is there not a better storyline to have in this film for Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, to end up how he did at the end, which was brilliant, because the end of the film to me was super.
One of my favourite endings.
I loved it because it was Spider-Man is now Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It had so many parallels with the video game. I don't know if you've played it, but fantastic. Like the swinging scene at the end was brilliant. It gave me goosebumps. Yeah. But I feel like this storyline with the multiverse was, I agree with James, too early. Could have been different, and I feel like there was a better way of going about coming to this character of Spider-Man just being Spider-Man.
Disagree because of the fact that I feel like Green Goblin in particular and the other 2 Spider-Mans helped mentor him and teach him how the realities of what it's like to be Spider-Man. I feel like without that storyline and without the Green Goblin specifically, he doesn't go through that. Obviously you can write a different storyline, but I just feel like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is the perfect person to do that for him.
Generally, it's because I know I'm agreeing with more of what you're saying than I think both of you are at this point. But it's from the fact that they definitely could have had a better story. Like I keep telling everyone about the ending. I'm just like, where these characters end up.
It is a high point
Everyone,
to be fair.
in terms of where that is, both separately and as part of this whole connected universe that they want to expand even, let alone just keep going, puts them in such a good place. Could they have, so the ends justify the means, could the means have been a lot better? Of course they could. But the fact that, and there's so, mainly because there's so many stories that could have, and that's my problem.
So better
with
stories.
this is there's so many other stories they could have put in place. Because there is, like you can fill in that gap from Far From Home to the ending there. It was probably the easy way of doing that, and obviously it was the way to connect it to everything else. Because my biggest fear, I think, from the start with the whole multiverse connection was, is this going to be completely important to this film?
Yeah.
I would have loved it to be Spider-Man's both dealing with Peter Parker dealing with his life and the fallout of the last 2 movies, and then Spider-Man, yes, becoming what we see as Spider-Man or what everyone's public perception of him is.
Building on the point you've just made, let's talk about the story, because we've talked about the plot quite a lot and the fact that probably the means to the end could have been a bit better. I feel like to get to the point at the end, and the ending is brilliant, like is superb. It could have been better. So let's talk about the stories. I feel like that's the best place to start, with the plot itself.
Well, especially with saying about Green Goblin and these like polarising points you got to hit.
Because you have a very positive view on this film, you enjoyed the story. Why?
Because I understand that there are some plot holes with doing a multiverse. There's always going to be. It's the same with like a time travel type film. There's always going to be, this could have happened because whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that I didn't find too many problems with it, and I just watched the film and thought everything that I had worries about going into this film, about how they'd explain certain things and how the villains would come back, these characters, and what their memories would be and where they take them from each timeline or whatever. It just made sense for what they were trying to tell, and I love the way that Tom Holland's develops in this film more than the other 2, even though the other 2 are great in this film as well.
Yeah.
Personally, I think.
Carry on. No, you carry on.
And Yeah, there's some villains that are sidelined a little bit, but I feel like the Green Goblin.
It's a nice way of putting it.
Well, they are.
Useless ones.
They are sidelined. The Green Goblin is the main villain. It works really well, I feel like, and so he hasn't had a villain that is just evil for the sake of being evil, for just causing, just wanting to, I don't know,
Cause chaos and problems in his
That was
life,
actually
yeah.
one of the important bits, the fact that as much as I might not have liked how certain things were done, the fact that that's why that worked well, because there was that, again, from the facts of the story, there was that futility to it all. It wasn't even his villain, but he was still having to be the one to deal with it all.
Yeah, he didn't have any scenes with Tobey Maguire, really, the Green
Yeah,
Goblin.
yeah,
So he was literally
Yeah.
put on Tom Holland as his villain.
Yeah, and this is what I was going to get to with even something like the other Spider-Man coming into it. The fear was like, oh, it's all going to be about the multiverse, it's all going to be about all these other versions. And as much as you got filmed with all these different villains, it felt like there wasn't even. This is kind of sidelining what you're just saying about Green Goblin being a good villain, but it did still then feel like there wasn't actually a main villain because of that point, of the fact that there wasn't. He was just having to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that was one of my hopes for this movie, was that he was just going to have to cope with all this stuff going on, get to that point once you did get to the end of the movie. But
Are we happy with how the multiverse came about?
It's
No,
not
I think you
finished
agree with me
though.
on this one.
I do.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, it all comes down. A lot of it just comes across as if like, oh, we're going to break the multiverse just because he feels bad that his mates ain't going to get into uni.
Yeah.
Which, let's face it, if they'd have got to uni as normal, they'd have ruined their lives anyway, because that's what uni does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
alright, another conversation, and not for this channel.
No, I understand. This isn't James's therapy, but yeah.
So,
I agree. It's a very childish way of breaking
That's
the
a good-
multiverse.
yes.
Especially when we look at TV programs, for God's sake, like Loki.
Oh.
What happened in Loki
Yeah.
was absolutely superb, and it sort of built up this idea of how the multiverse got broken. You were anticipating this event, not even an event, this happening, where it was exciting. It was built up, and it was like, okay, yeah, that is worthy of what happened at the end of Loki, because it was built up as this. Oh, if the multiverse does break, then it's going to be carnage. There's going to be worlds exploding. There's going to be various wars and battles going on. When actually, the multiverse got broken because Peter Parker got a little bit upset and asked Doctor Strange for the wrong thing. All he had
When
to
he
say
could've
was
just gone-
forget
I
Mysterio.
feel like
Yeah,
Matt's
sort
going to
that
come back with what. I'm going to let you actually say this, because I feel like you're actually going to.
Say what you're thinking.
Just because of where you were going with that, I don't think that necessarily detracts from. Not necessarily from the film. It probably draws a lot of bad attention to the film and how that's done, and how certain characters treated, how Spider-Man's treated. It was the one bit of that sort of made sense, in the fact that he's still a kid, and that was the point they kept trying to make. And I think that's one of the good, funny aspects of a character like Peter Parker, where you've got like someone who should be a genius, but they're an idiot.
Yeah.
He's
And then for them to become like full hero level, just makes that whole
if you're a good person and you're feeling enormous guilt over what happened. This isn't what I was going to say, but it's just what I just thought of because of what you said. You're not going to not try and do everything you possibly can to try and help that situation. And if you know Doctor Strange,
you're a teenager that's been given that on the plate.
He can help you. You're going to do it, aren't you? Like, and Doctor Strange obviously has the ability to break the multiverse. He just does. And whether he's doing it for a wrong reason or a right reason, it might be a part of Doctor Strange's character that he learns that he needs to use his power better.
It comes back to his not incompetency. It's clearly established that he knows what he's doing. That's some of the drawbacks where people are getting confused, thinking, "Oh, would he have done this? Would he have done that?" And I know we're going to probably talk about that a bit, but more of the factor: why were they not? Doctor Strange was the one at fault. And yeah, it took to the very end to actually, for it to almost get accepted as that, but I still think it kind of got brushed off. But the point was, it wasn't Spider-Man's fault. It wasn't Tom Holland's Peter Parker who made that sort of slip up.
No, it was Mysterio. The whole thing comes back to the previous film. It's not. It's what's built up from the previous film of how.
I did such a yearning, just heartwarming smile when he said it's all Mysterio. Because partly it was linking to, obviously, it was something I know you'd said before, and a lot of people were just going like, oh, what if, genuinely, what if it's actually all Mysterio's fault? Like, what if he's the mastermind of this whole game? But not that. Regardless, he is literally shot, he's dead, but it still works.
He had a plan in motion to ruin his life.
It's still gone, and it works.
Yeah, see, I disagree, because I feel like Mysterio's plan of ruining Peter's life should have been the focus of this film.
And it felt like it had gone in 15 minutes.
It had gone in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
The title of the film is called No Way Home. It doesn't fit with the other two titles of the film. So if you go Spider-Man Homecoming is him sort of graduating high school, sort of going through this adolescence and understanding his powers and who he is.
I remember Far From Home worrying me, thinking where are they going to go?
Yeah, well, Far From Home was again
just on holiday.
But yeah, it was Far From Home in the sense it was fighting it all, absolutely. But then No Way Home should have been the idea of Spider-Man, in my opinion, Spider-Man not being able to return to who he was, his home, because his identity has been revealed to the world. And that should have been the focus. Yeah, but for 10 minutes.
No, by the end, he doesn't. No one knows who he is. That's no way home for him because he's got no one to connect to. He's not at home. Aunt May's gone.
Yeah.
No one knows who he is.
Yeah.
He's just alone in the world, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
So that is no way home.
No, get it. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to hear obviously some of the other sort of challenges to some of these good points. But the fact, and now I'm just gonna sort of let this slide. I'm gonna come back to stuff.
For me, coming out of Far From Home, obviously those first sort of 15-20 minutes, whatever, obviously lead straight on from that film.
Yeah.
They just completely wiped out 3 or 4 different stories they could have gone with, which would have developed him just as much.
Yeah.
As his Spider-Man.
This is what's coming to the
whole him being
rather than the issue of the film of Spider-Man.
No,
because they're trying to push the general storyline of we need to push this multiverse stuff really quick. So this
it always feels like a panic. Oh God, let's get it in quick, shove it in with Spider-Man because it's Spider-Man. Everyone's going to watch it. Whereas they could have done this whole I think I liked one thing just to rip off it a little with Homecoming and Far From Home. Your villain was Vulture and Mysterio, which weren't yes, they're well-known villains in Spider-Man, but they're not your top sort of.
Not A-list.
They're not your top A-list Spider-Man villains, are they? I love the fact that they've been going for these they are your sort of B-list more, and making something of them. I mean, to be honest, they're probably 2 of the better MCU villains we've had.
Yeah.
Right. So then, if they'd have chucked someone in for this movie like Craven, and we'd had another thing like that where they could develop it I suppose it'd be copying the idea really, but there's an episode of Batman Beyond where he's I can't remember what the Hunter villain's called, but he's basically on the hunt for the for Batman because he's the greatest thing to catch. That would have translated so well as a movie, and just to round it off somewhere where he's left then on his own, the whole No Way Home thing. He's got nowhere to go to. He's being hunted. He's got to get rid of everything so he can get out of the way.
Yeah, and I feel like in the first 2 there's this big focus on his identity and the fact that no one knows who he is other than Vulture, who decides to keep it a secret. Even in the end credits, he goes, "Well, who's Spider-Man? Oh, I'm not going to tell you."
Yeah.
And then even in the comics when Tony Stark invites him to his the Avengers complex for the suit. In the comics, he accepts the suit, and then everyone finds out his identity. So it's sort of going along those lines of what's going to happen when people find out his identity. Well, the first 15 minutes is the only thing that answers that question. What's going to happen? People are going to flood him, obviously, because he's Spider-Man. But then it's going to be pushed under the carpet because Matt Murdock comes in and says, oh, that's fine, they can't charge you with anything. And then it goes away from the fact of people knowing who Peter Parker is, when actually in the comics, in this story, he's developed on this Spider-Man in his universe dealing with that problem and how he then comes to being who he is, dealing with two lives and that life. Whereas in this, it mainly focuses on, yes, it still does develop Spider-Man, but it mainly focuses on nostalgia and introducing those villains and saying, right, we're going to develop this character through Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus and Sandman and Lizard and Electro, all that have no relevance to our main character at all, or him dealing with what he's going through, because he could have, you take the villains out of it, he can still go through what he can still go through what happened in the film. 100%. Why can't he can?
He can't, because the Green Goblin blows up the thing so that if anyone came, say if like a random villain came through like Craven who you didn't know because of no nostalgia or anything like that, and he didn't really affect Spider-Man at all when he came through the portal, and they just reverse the spell, he just goes back to normal life, doesn't he? Like, if Green Goblin's not there, it doesn't kill his and doesn't blow up the box, he doesn't have to go through what he goes through at the end of the film, where no one knows who he is. Because he goes from everyone knowing who he is to no one, but both are just as bad, but he has to just accept that this one's better because of it's affecting the people around him.
But you can still get to that without introducing the multiverse now and feeling like it's rushed.
You can, so it does make sense for the story, I feel like.
I don't feel like it's needed, because you can still introduce Craven, you've got Scorpion in the prison, okay?
Yeah, but they're still making 3 more.
Which I understand, which probably should have been where the multiverse should have been introduced in Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Not in Spider-Man. And if Doctor Strange come before Spider-Man, some of the happenings might have made more sense and had more reasoning behind them. But I just feel like what they've done is gone, Spider-Man, well, he's a big MCU star, this is our franchise boy, our person.
Yeah, a lot
Here's
of
the
it's
multiverse for you guys to understand.
A lot of it's coming down to the image, the thing they're trying to push.
Yeah.
And then that's why things like the more valid parts of having a story that's attached to this thread that's cutting through loads of movies. So like something that's has a bit more time put towards it, like Green Goblin. Then all it's done, what takes it more then is some of the ones that are undercooked, like Lizard, Sandman. Just and even something like Sandman, where you take the movie they come from, and again it's not a movie I have much attachment to, but they deal with a character like that so much better in its own origin, where you've got like compared to a character like Venom, where that's introduced, and it's one of the worst treatments of a character ever. But and it's not to say from that nostalgic point of, oh, they basically took a character that was done well and then not done anything with it because they didn't need to have anything done with it. It's like the whole villains thing. Like, say we just accept it and just admit defeat, which is what we have to do in the end anyway, because it's happened. That the multiverse was going to be part of this story anyway. It would have generally been fine if most of the villains and stuff, because they had no relevance, no attachment, they just do turn up for a big flashy fight. That would have been fine, because the effect would have been probably the same. The only bit that really ties it in then is the whole is the story of Peter trying to actually help and trying to change them, and then the sort of, again, that futility of that falling to pieces obviously raises Goblin up to not necessarily more of a standard than he was, because I think the people that had the attachment to that character before, of course they were going to love it, of course they were going to love it more. But gives a character like that more chance to do more. But yeah, the problem with those underused characters really just suck the life out of any of the good, not any, but a lot of the weight of that good stuff.
I feel that's probably why, I don't know about you, James, I didn't like the multiverse storyline as much as others, because the fact that they brought Sandman and Lizard back and then did nothing with them, they didn't hold any importance to the story. You talk about Sandman as a character, talk about Sandman and Lizard, they were in CGI for the whole film. I'm pretty sure that's because they didn't use the actors that actually played them.
Yeah.
They reused, they reused recordings, and that's why they kept in CGI. And they reused films.
Recorded the lines, but they weren't there to shoot the scenes.
Why?
I don't know.
I just felt it detracted. Seeing Sandman constantly in sand and Lizard constantly as a lizard, that's not.
The only argument I have against that, because I do feel like they were underutilised, is when he does break through the multiverse. You can't really there's some breakthrough that know who Peter is, and then he manages to stop it. But obviously, some are going to break through that aren't going to have any impact on the story, like we find out in the credit scene. So Sandman is just one of those that just happened. It's just another way of saying some broke through and some didn't.
Yeah, but you could not have them in it. Don't have them through, because then you'd focus on Doctor Octopus, Green Goblin, and Electro, and have more of a focus on them three. Even though you don't need to develop them even more than the Electro, you probably do, because
It's terrible.
yeah, not as a leading villain as the top three that were sort of advertised. I don't think he cuts the mustard when you compare him to Doctor Octopus or Green Goblin at all. But you can develop them three even more, and their relationship and sort of vendetta against this Peter Parker that we have now. If you take Lizard and Sandman completely out of it, because Sandman's intentions are just completely.
They make sense to me.
I don't understand why. But why does he join the rest of the villains if he wants to get out?
He's not joining them. He's just there to get the box because of how all the villains broke out earlier in the film. You know, he was going on with a plan just so he can
go home to his daughter.
Yeah, so he was waiting for the villains to be cured and then he'd go home. But when he finds out that the Green Goblin was there the whole time and he causes chaos, his one goal is to just get the box for himself and go home, isn't it?
But I don't get
he's not
that.
with the other villains. He's just trying to get the box off.
But just
Well,
how
I think
Spider-Man.
they could have done.
Spider-Man.
They could have just done a slight bit more with that, and made such a minimal appearance into something quite weighty.
I agree he's underutilised because I do like his motivations. It's just not enough in the film.
That's the thing. Yeah, I think it was a case, and they wouldn't have had to do much because it's a big film for what it is, but then it's a case of what's in it. Of course, it had to be that, and they had to cram a hell of a lot in.
What?
But with something like that, they could have been really efficient, where they literally just did the slightest bit. Where it's like this whole thing is that it was too much like heroes, villains, where it's just like if there was that hint of that complexity actually mattering, you didn't necessarily have to just help Spider-Man to stop the villains. It's a case of just act, just something else occurring that made that stand. But I mean, I think with the fact of them not being in it, I think it's either not being in it or they're there because of course some of them are going to slip through, like you were saying. I think the middle ground of that and the thing that they didn't want to risk purely because of the whole just jumping on recognisability and nostalgia and all these, the attention it's going to get is have some of these harder hitting, more important nostalgic additions, but then some of the ones that aren't important, they could be new characters, they could be these odd little things, make the multiverse seem like a multiverse. Whereas anyone that had the attachment to some of these movies, yes, some of them were being hyped with the excitement because they were getting to see some of these things from movies they loved, some people more than the MCU iterations we've got. It almost made more sense for people that hadn't seen those movies. And I think that's this weird thing it's got to, whereas, and it's one of the main points I had, is the fact that you've got a movie where, yes, it was marketed towards a lot of these audiences that maybe hadn't really gelled with the MCUs till now. And it was weird because it's one of the first MCU movies which I've been wanting for a while, but I didn't expect to be talking about it in this movie, where it does feel separate and it does feel disconnected and its own thing, in the sense where you could have not watched basically any of the MCU.
I like that.
You could literally drop into that, and I've been wanting that for like any of the MCU movies could do it, and I think they could do it. They just don't. But one of the weird things is the fact that as much as you feel like you don't have to have watched the MCU, I feel like the proper enjoyment, the proper like success of some of the additions they did make is better if you've seen the Raimi trilogy and the Amazing Spider-Man, maybe. And that's what is confusing almost and a bit jarring, because the treatment of the Spider-Man, the two Spider-Man being introduced into it, was surprising, because again I expected the worst, but in terms of what they actually did, they didn't actually make it about them.
No,
they were in it, and they were part of the
brilliant,
story, which I'd have actually preferred than just a waving glimpse. A waving glimpse would have been fine, just to laugh at people that maybe were putting all their attention on the introduction of these characters.
Yeah.
But I was more preferring that they were actually relevant to the story. But what I didn't want is them to be the whole part of the story. And the fact is, they weren't. Yes, they were used to get Tom Holland's Peter to that point, or used to be part of that process. But it was about Tom Holland's Peter rather than them. And I was relieved at that.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire being in it, I thought the way in which all three of them sort of conversed and sort of interacted with each other was absolutely superb. It was honestly some of the best film I've watched, seeing them three, possibly because of the hype, because of the nostalgia, but also because of the conversations they were having with one another, because of the development that they were causing for Tom Holland's character, which was fantastic, and the action scenes as well, where and the scene of them swinging together towards the villains is possibly one of the best things I've ever seen. I think.
Of course.
Just because of
they knew that
what it holds.
They knew what to do.
Yeah.
With that, I think, and that comes back to like one of my more genuine praises of that is like the scenes of them together. Like, obviously there wasn't that many actually, like, which was good, but it was the main one that stood out to me was the scaffolding scene where they're almost waiting for the fight. Like, and that comes back to, I think, the bit that's, it's not missed, it's basically just, I think it's just that undertone of what everyone's saying about a lot of this movie, whether you like it or don't, is when it lands, like bits like that, it's just that sort of like, it's self-aware, like it just, like, they're fully like accepting of what they're doing with all the just, basically just the money grabbing attention of it all, but they're also giving that time for all the people watching it, the audiences that are just strictly attached to the MCU, the audiences that are just new to it because it's just this big Spider-Man movie that's being released, and the audiences that have felt sort of detached from these movies but that grew up with maybe the Raimi trilogy or something like that. So like that glimmer of that sort of like core of it and that heart of it does come through still. Surprised it still makes it through in certain parts of it. I just wish they were more confident in it.
You've been awfully quiet, James.
I have been just taking everything in.
Go on.
I feel like you're just going to hit with
I was going to say,
big,
drop
just a big one or something.
bomb there.
Well, I mean, I'll make no bones about it. The villains were the things that I was going to have a problem with straight away from the trailer. Like, as soon as I see that trailer, you two know especially, I weren't quiet about it. Straight off, to me, it's just introducing villains and stuff from, and these characters from like the previous trilogies that we've had, or films, whatever. I don't know, it just takes away from the chance of them introducing the MCU versions of them. So like if they introduce Green Goblin now,
one of the comments, yeah, I get
what impact that really going to have now? Because all the fanboys have gone, oh my god, Willem Dafoe's back. How good was that? And he's took over that now. Where are they going to go if they want to bring in their own version? Just stuff like that, and saying like you got those big ones.
I think
with that, I've just got no faith now that they're going to be able to bring that back in their own sort of way.
With that, I think I've said it. I think to everybody I've spoken to about this film. With that, I don't think they'll introduce Green Goblin because I don't think they can with what the Amazing Spider-Man did and Sam Raimi's trilogy did. I don't think they'll introduce their own. I think what they'll do is build on Hobgoblin and Jacob Batalon's character Ned becoming Hobgoblin, which I think will be good, but it's also a reuse. I can only see it being in a reuse storyline of he's going out with Zendaya's character at the minute, MJ, and because she doesn't know who Peter is, then he's going to become jealous and then turn into this character that bids to kill him or get revenge or whatever. And it was teased in No Way Home, to be fair, with what Ned's character was saying, and even at the end, currently speaking to, where MJ does that silly whip hair thing that she does as soon as Ned walks in, acting exactly the same how she acted with Peter as a character when she fancied him towards the first start of the film. So I think with that they'll tackle it in the sense that Ned will be Hobgoblin. Yeah. But I do get the point.
I mean, for me personally, it was like as soon as I saw that, I was like, I've seen these guys be those characters. Like, give me a new take on it. Like it just felt again. To me, it straight away was like that's a cash grab because they're just going right. We're panicking. Get those back in. That'll get people in just purely on the nostalgia trip.
I think they've panicked so much because Eternals was, if you've not already known, we don't like it. Not very good. Shang-Chi, I enjoyed it, but a lot of people thought it was underwhelming.
I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I also agree with that. I thought it was brilliant.
I think I'm probably like the least excited about it, but again, it's probably another conversation. It's going to come through different bits.
Black Widow.
Keep quiet.
Black Widow's an underwhelming origin story, in my opinion. I thought they could have done a lot better with it. So I feel like the start to Phase 4 has been very lacklustre and slow. So with that, I feel like they've got what we need.
The panic thing has come from the because they almost went for a more toned down vibe with the previous two Spider-Man films. It's like, to me, it didn't feel like they were pushing them as much as like the established characters that already got, like Cap and Iron Man, because they'd already had their trilogies and were like straight up there, like the proper big guns. Because Spider-Man was coming in that bit behind them, and it was a completely different sort of take from what we'd had before, where he was a younger Spider-Man and everything. They were tackling it all completely differently, and it feels like I'm pretty sure I've heard like statistic-wise, those films didn't do as well as some of the other ones that they got at the time, obviously. So to me, it did feel like, Spider-Man's got to be the poster boy for Phase 4 now, because we've got rid of most of the other big characters in like Endgame and stuff. So let's give us something that's gonna get the audiences in just purely on that, and grabbing these, like we said, the amount of people that just jumped in on it that weren't fully invested in the MCU then. Right, and it's just like we'll get them in. There we are, reeled them in. Look, Willem Dafoe's back in last. Here we go.
That's going to happen naturally though, because Spider-Man is the most popular Marvel character.
Yeah, it just feels like they were doing it cheap.
It's just going to happen. It's
just a cheap way of doing it.
Spider-Man. And to counter your point about the films, them saying, they need to have a big event because the Phase 4 hasn't got us a good start. They had this film planned before those films came out, so they haven't thought that. They had this film planned for a while. Yeah, because of the mysterious.
I think the acceptance of a lot of these things, it's like the acceptance of the fact that they had the multiverse thread because it's the MCU and they've got to have they've got to have whatever they're pushing at a certain moment. And then also just the fact of the acceptance that, yeah, of course, they were trying to reel people in. And that's where a lot of my problems get sort of pushed aside, but it's only because I think when I sort of look at it, I'm just like, it's because a lot of other things have pushed me to the point of thinking, do I expect much more? and I know this movie a lot was about expectations, but it's like there's been these, and yeah, even if it is just planned or not, some people have had these disappointments of or underwhelming movies, and then it comes to this. So maybe it's just people have been beaten down to the point where it's like, oh. And that's what I feel like people who have been really adamant that they were either excited about it or knew they were going to love it, people that have then been in that position, probably not enjoyed it as much as they thought they would, have still just been like, yeah, but it's Marvel, what do we expect? And it's come back to that whole not thinking too much of it, purely because they're just this assumption about what Marvel is as a whole.
Do we think that they throw, I mean this is going off the topic Spider-Man a little bit, do you think they throw so much into the trilogies of characters because of the Iron Man trilogy, and the third film that was released from the Iron Man trilogy wasn't as well accepted as probably they thought it was going to be? Because the only other trilogies from characters were now are Captain America, Thor, and now Spider-Man. All of which I'm thinking of. Captain America's was Civil War, which was just absolute carnage. Ragnarok had some sort of coming together as a team with Valkyrie, Hulk, Loki, Korg even coming into it, and then now Spider-Man as well. Do you think with Iron Man sort of not falling flat in its face, it didn't, but being underwhelming, do you think that's why they're trying to put so much into the trilogies to sort of keep people invested and sort of build every film?
I just feel like you need to build each film anyway.
Yeah, on the cheaper side, I think, yeah. But then there's the obvious side of like, well, where's this going to go? Like, if this, it either goes one way or the other. If you've got a character that starts off big, and then it's a case of almost breaking them down, even if it ends well, be it a trilogy or be it part of this continued universe, but it's a trilogy within it. If you end that, be it positive or whatever, but it's just a character where it's built them up to break them down, and then they've become what they've become at the end, or it's a case of they're sort of nothing and they become something. So I think that just naturally just brings in, especially when you throw in superheroes and just this weird connected universe, it throws in just these bigger, more involved stories, and I think that's why actually, as much as it was underwhelming for people, I think that's why a movie like Iron Man 3 was more underrated, because it tried to, yes, it was reacting to its previous two movies, but it was also going, it was offering something else.
Yeah.
It was offering like,
it was still
it was more of a character focus, just let's go just straight back out.
Yeah, well, it was still a standalone Iron Man film.
Yeah.
Whereas we look at the trilogies now, yeah, alright, the main character, Spider-Man, Thor, Captain America, but there's also other personalities in there that you could see as main characters, so to speak.
What I do want to say about trilogy as well, you saying that, is the similarities, and of course I think they just couldn't always do that deliberately and just unconsciously, but like, you've got Iron Man 3, what is he without the suit?
Yeah.
And then you see that mirrored in, say, with Captain America's story, you see it with Thor, and I mean, they're almost a bit blatant with stuff like that. It's like, is he even Captain America? What is he without the shield? And then Thor, what is he without the hammer, sort of thing. It's just, so there was that general theme, but I think again that comes into that Marvel theme of what they're trying to push at a certain time to get them to where they want to get them to.
I mean, that was off topic of Spider-Man, but I was just curious just to see.
I feel like that was before when they weren't as popular with Iron Man 3. It's still in terms of the first three Iron Mans, Iron Man 3 was still the biggest spectacle of all three of them.
Yeah.
Blowing up the suits in the end scene. So it just naturally happens in trilogies where they just get bigger in terms of spectacle.
But do you not think there's going to be a ceiling? Like with this Spider-Man film now, you can't go through the ceiling. So if you're comparing this to events that are happening, how are they going to build the next trilogy to something that's equivalent to this?
That's what I feel with it. It should have been a bit further.
That was the concern, that was the worry.
You have to trust their good writing.
This is it, when you said that a bit ago, it's like that's what we're literally resting on all the time. And I agree. But it's a case of like that's what we're always holding out on. It's like it's why we're having. It's why we're literally saying about like all this stuff to do with No Way Home, whether we like it or not. We're just like there's these fallbacks on writing and all these different aspects, and it's like hoping on good writing. It's like, well, we got Shang-Chi, and I know I've just said like I'm not as interested. I don't think I was excited as other people about it. But you've got these movies, and there's just something. It's usually a couple of things, but some big things about the movies just almost just flat or not given thought.
Yeah.
I mean, the first one that comes to mind with Black Widow, yeah, you've got this underwhelming treatment of it. But to me, it's kind of unnoticed for some people. But I went straight to say stuff like some of the visuals and CGI. I just thought it was just cheap. But and then you've got Shang-Chi, some of the writing, in my opinion.
That's what this is, Tom. Opinion.
Yeah, and so yeah, I think there is this worry, this concern, like, why are you doing too much too soon?
Yeah.
That with Spider-Man alone, that's how they started. And I've been saying, I've only really come to this. I can't remember who I was talking to now. But I was basically saying how there was that practicality of them as a business, basically. Like, they had Spider-Man, they could work with Spider-Man. What are we going to do with Spider-Man? Okay, we're at a really good point at the minute. Let's use them as much as we can. Yes, we're going to do some standalone movies, but we'll probably only be able to make a trilogy. That's our best bet. We do a trilogy, we've got him in these like team-up movies. Let's just use it. And then putting that into the realm of the actual universe and that character. Yes, you had those glimpses of like, yes, he had an origin, yes, he had a beginning, but we didn't have to see any of that. But it was all just big stuff, team-ups, aliens, the whole like culmination of all of that Infinity Saga. And then it's like, that was the ceiling, I think. So then, yeah, No Way Home felt like, okay, like, are they really testing that? Are they pushing that? Like, are they gonna break that concern of where that ceiling is?
Yeah.
You can't judge. If we're judging this film as a film, that's not really, to me, relevant into how good this film is, because you can't go, the next films are going to be poor because this film's hit the ceiling.
Yeah, that's where I was.
It's not the sense of it's hit the ceiling. It's sense of, have they tried to cram too much in? I
think it suits the storyline of the multiverse good.
But
it just depends whether.
But that storyline's still really unclear because it's been teased in various different things, but we still don't know what the end goal with it. My idea of it, which they've talked about, which they introduced in Loki, was Kang.
They're still going to do that though, aren't they?
I agree, but I feel like with putting it in Spider-Man, they've not ruined the trilogy, but what they've done is not introduced it in the best way to us as Marvel fans, because it should have been introduced in Doctor Strange, it should have been built on in Ant-Man Quantumania, and then probably Spider-Man, just to give us a better understanding and idea of what it is, or even just change the story, because again it comes back to too much too soon. Not the fact that it's hit the ceiling, is it too much? Have they tried to cram too much in now, and then where do they go from there?
I understand, I agree with that point a little bit, but you could also say the fact that they've done it in this film, and no one, not even Doctor Strange, really knows the ramifications of what he's doing, and Tom Holland, Spider-Man, doesn't really know anything about what the effects of what he's caused, and he's obviously being punished for that with what he's now going through, how he ended the film. But we as the audience don't know either, so we're watching this film as the characters themselves don't know how the multiverse really happens, how it's explained or anything. Obviously, if you read the comics, you know, but
yeah,
as like if you're looking at it through the MCU, we don't know. And I feel like that suits this storyline quite well. Yeah. Because the characters don't, and he's obviously a kid, and he's young, and he doesn't know the ramifications of what he's doing, and we the audience don't know either, but we're learning with him, sort of thing.
I think that's the point where this is more about the creative side of Marvel rather than their plan and their structure of how they want to do things.
Just move it quietly.
It's just like, I think at first they had to be quite structured, and they had less to work with, so they could be just like, right, this is where we're going, and we know all these interconnected threads that are going to get us there. Whereas now I think things are big enough where, yes, they've got to treat it right, but they're free now to not have to plan things out as much. To me, there is a worry in that, in the fact that, say Doctor Strange in this movie, and particularly in terms of where he's going to go, whether you think that all the multiverse and all the connections to that should have been just involved in his movie. His role in this movie is a case of we're at a point where they can decide later on how much he was aware of. Because all we had to take for everyone's take for the truth was, it's to do with who's aware Peter Parker's Spider-Man. So say that as a part of like what we're supposed to take as something to hold on to. Yeah, it's even as you're watching it, you don't have to think for longer than a few seconds to think, oh, that's just like Strange's way of understanding it. It doesn't mean he actually knows the full story. But I think to the point now where they don't have to do that with a lot of their decisions. Eternals is a big one of this, where they can decide later on what matters and what doesn't.
Mm.
And as much as I agree with that, because I don't like the way some of it's all gone, and I get why some people assume about the MCU with like, oh, but all this connection and all this, you've got to know this, that, and the other. But it gives them a lot of get out of jail free cards. Like, it's coming back onto Eternals. Even the Celestials' like origin, like they literally, not the Eternals' origin, the Celestials' origin that they explain in that quick, shoddy, painty sort of
everything's
montage
in the
thing.
Eternals.
They could literally turn around in the next one, or in the next appearance of any of those characters, and just go, oh right, we were lied to about things like the Deviants and stuff. Of course, Arishem or whatever his name was lying about the origins of this.
Mm.
That's like as an example and stuff, and it's like, and even down to the real stupid realism facts that we were talking about of like, what do they look like humans and all this sort of stuff. Obviously, of course, they look like humans because they're acting in a movie that's made for this, but they're getting to the point now where they get to decide after the fact what is important. Which is good for a standalone story, because you shouldn't have your sequels all planned out and everything just lined up.
Yeah, it's Marvel. They have the next 20 years planned out.
And this is why it's jarring to what's already happened.
Yeah.
It is just that blind concern as a fan of just being, oh, they could do this, that, and the other, and the fact is now they could do anything, and that's just shaky.
Yeah. Plot holes. There are a couple.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to let everyone else go on about this, because
I agree with that.
I
I don't think they're major.
No. Yes, in the sense that the whole idea of the multiverse breaking was that everyone that came through knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man. So there's two standout ones that are there like, okay, so how have they come through? Venom being one, which is, I don't know about anyone else, the worst end credit scene I've possibly seen in MCU.
No.
It's the only time I've actually physically shouted out in a cinema, and I can't remember what I said. Like something like, "What is this shit?"
And it was infuriating.
I mean, now Venom could be in the universe, but it's just, I don't know. At the moment, there's no payoff.
and he could have been anywhere. He could have been anywhere, especially
Yes.
the whole multiverse, the different versions. It's like
100%.
and yeah, then they could have even as much as I think it's a bad decision, the whole splitting where it's just a little drop left.
No, doesn't make sense.
If they wanted to go with that and just say that's just how it works, because again, we just had to take certain bits of truth because we didn't have much information to go on, especially when they're dealing with magic, because a lot of things, especially with something on this level. They don't have to go that deep into how this magic works.
Yeah, magic's different than.
You just have to listen to. You just have to listen to like. Yeah, this is where I'm sort of getting to is like the fact that you just have to take what you're given and just go with that, and the fact that that's split.
Wouldn't that drop go back with Venom though? Because it is Venom.
Yeah, and it wasn't. Venom wasn't on show at all.
This is the point, yeah, and it's a case of it's just a convenient sort of way, but it's the fact that if they wanted to do that for some reason, the thing is, I just don't know what that reason would be.
There is one. That is.
Yeah.
That's Sony. That is, and this is ridiculous. That is probably Sony in the contract negotiations because there was a lot. These were very public in the sense that they were asking for Spider-Man versus Venom or Venom to be included in some way. But I think, thank Christ, what Marvel have done is gone, well, we don't want your Venom because it's terrible. So what we're going to do is trying to incorporate your Venom in creating our own Venom, which they've done, but then it also just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, as far
There's
as
a lot better ways of going about it, and no.
As far as a creative decision goes, it's a case of it was promising, and only in the fact that it was okay. You've actually established that, like if that scene was him staying in the universe, it was like, oh, we know what's coming now, like, and it would be inevitable. Whereas by doing that, it's like, oh, okay, as a creative choice, Sony are actually okay with just doing their movies, seeing what happens with that, because they are still putting effort into some of that, and to see where that goes, especially after a movie like No Way Home. But yeah, the only way that would have landed if they wanted to do that whole split for some reason of showing that drop is if they hadn't shown all the other characters that turned up from the multiverse. They went through meticulously showing a little glimpse of each from this trade. If they just skipped out a few of the unimportant ones, they could have hand-waved and just gone, yeah, but you didn't see all of them go.
The thing is, the process in which they disappeared wasn't a case of anything's going to be left behind as well. Look, the detail. They faded from existence. It wasn't a case of they've been sucked away or they've been splattered or shot or with something. It made no sense. Second plot hole, one that I think that stood out to me, but about anyone else. Electro knowing who Peter Parker is.
I genuinely couldn't remember.
Am I correct in thinking that he doesn't know that Spider-Man is Peter Parker and Peter Parker is Spider-Man? Because he sees his face and goes, I was hoping you'd be black. Well,
this comes back to
hold on a minute, so how are you here in the first place?
Yeah. And this comes back to my actual plot hole with that, which I hadn't thought of any of this, because that's why I said I'd leave it to you lot. But with Electro, it comes to my general thing with the villains is like, some are obvious, some aren't. There's only a couple of them where the ones you're watching in No Way Home are the ones you saw in the other movies. Green Goblin's the obvious one to me, where it's not the one that we watched. I don't know. If I'm absolutely wrong and I've just misunderstood the whole movie, please let me know, because I want a different...
No, sorry. So what you're saying is that the villains aren't the ones of what we've watched?
Like in a really, again, this whole like self-aware version of the movies, is that Green Goblin the one we watched in Spider-Man 1 that eventually got the glider through him? Because...
Well, that's a plot hole in itself, because then if he gets sent back, he's still going to be in that situation.
I'm an idiot.
I'm
definitely an idiot with all these villains.
They literally talked about their experiences.
I know, like, what's his face? I know Doc Ock was there to just go, I was fighting, he died, and then the whole Electro and Lizard exchange. I know that was literally meant for that.
Painful, so it was.
And I know, it's just put in there specifically for that purpose, but I'm assuming now that I'm an idiot with literally all of it, because, and this is why I was going to keep out of it, but say, for the sake of argument,
don't get to screw me that much. Kick him in the table.
Sorry.
I'm going to get kicking out. If he wasn't, say this Electro wasn't that Electro.
He is.
He 100% is.
The thing is, like, I appreciate what you're trying to say, but they are.
Yeah.
Because they spoke about what happened in their universes. And it goes to the fact that, well, the Spider-Man that we're looking at, not the Spider-Man that we've watched, because they all have those connections with the villains. So they are who they're supposed to be.
He says to the lizards that he knows what the lizard tried to do before he was there.
Yeah. There's both. In many ways, it makes it better. But now I know that it's definitely not, because I've got other people actually talking to me about it. It's making me yearn for the version that I had in my head. The one I experienced, because you got Lizard then, which was an underwhelming character, but seemed like one of the main ones that was actually the version that was in the movie. And for them to him be that one that was in the background, sort of not plotting, but just letting the stuff unfold because he knew it was going to go badly.
The thing is that this links to what I'm going to say. We needed to see more of them individually. I know it's hard because you've introduced five different villains. Excuse me, but seeing them be them. You didn't really see them without Spider-Man there.
Typical overcrowding that they're doing every bloody
like they needed to isolate some of them, or the team of villains, to sort of show what their intentions are and sort of give us more depth to them. Especially what with like Lizard, Electro and Sandman. That would have been a fantastic opportunity to add depth to them for us to sort of go, oh, okay. And I'm not saying because we disagree on like Sandman's intentions, but it would have been nice to sort of see his thought process, his plans that he put into place to then go against, because then it would have been clearer. Because for a bystander watching, you're seeing Sandman as part of the villains team because they're there and Spider-Man and they go together. But as you've explained, like I understand it. Yeah, I know he does say, but just saying it.
Glossed over.
Yeah, and it's like after May dies. Spoiler.
I've already said it.
Yeah. After May dies, all the villains sort of scatter and disappear. And I'd like to have seen a bit more of what actually happened.
What they're actually doing.
Yeah, because it just sort of seemed like, oh, okay, so they've gone. This is happening. Oh, and then they're all back
if
now.
you're just going to do that end fight, just do the end fight, like we were saying earlier. Like the villains are that unimportant, which they weren't really, and obviously they did that structure of the whole. I didn't like the structure of the whole like video game level of you've got to do this one now, you're in this one, and then it got to that point. But yeah, they could have just done that end fight if that was all it was going to be. It
was the sideline then to introduce these two.
Yeah.
Tobey Maguire and Andrew
I'm so glad you just pointed at those.
Yeah, I'm just using
For those that can't see, you might not be able to see properly. We have all the Spider-Men here. We have the Into the Spider-Verse Spider-Man here.
Shining stars of Spider-Man.
Yeah, it's just to introduce these two, isn't it? So they just sideline them for a little bit and then they come back. But for all we know, Green Goblin could have blown up, 2 cities by that time.
Yeah, but we don't know that, do we? We don't. We haven't. So like Dr. Octopus, he was good at that time. So what then has he done to help if he comes back and helps? What's his thought process? Has he tried to talk to the other villains and persuade them, which he was trying to do anyway, or has he just buggered off on his own and done his own devices?
Waited for the right moment.
Yeah, they've just been sidelined for the other 2 Spider-Man. That's all you can say.
I know, but I get that. But then is that not piss poor reasoning?
It is.
Okay, good. We agree.
Given the plot hole thing, still, with the villains, when they get sent back after they've been cured or whatever, what stops the ones from being killed in their universe?
Oh, the whole thing they're trying to avoid about and just going to the
because, Doc Ock isn't going to be evil anymore. So
yeah, but if he's being zapped straight back to that point where he fucking died anyway.
Oh, we don't know where they go.
Where do they go? What determines that all that work they've done and everything they've just left?
Doc Ock wouldn't sacrifice himself to save them because he would stop the machine before.
Yeah, but hold on. What moment did they go back to? Because where
Doc Ock says what moment he's taken from.
Didn't he say,
just as he's about to die.
As he's going,
didn't know why he has Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man on the
wall. So they would stop the fight, wouldn't they?
Okay.
Green Goblin would probably. No, he would be alright because he wouldn't actually go and attack Spider-Man at the end, would he?
I don't know where he came from. But
it just didn't seem that clear.
I'm just curious
where they're coming from exactly and which point. That just seemed a bit all over the shop.
Again, they can just decide whatever they want.
Yeah, but then it doesn't undo everything that they've done previously.
Exactly. Like people, like the coppers, they aren't going to know that they're all good now, are they? They're still going to be after them with some.
I mean, that's just
some
something
form.
people just have to either like
Like Peter
think
in
about
that
or
time
not. If
is
you
still
think
going to
about
think
it, it's
he's-
kind of bleak because yeah, like you say, even if Spider-Man just goes, yeah, you're good. Like, oh,
No, I'm just going to believe
just
him.
ruin my life.
But with, hold on, just putting on that point, and I'm probably just thinking out loud a little bit. So if Green Goblin goes back to his point, and Doc Trotskus goes back to his point, what does that do to Tobey Maguire's head?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
So does Green
Well,
Goblin
his
have
life.
It's
Well,
not,
yeah, well,
How does that affect
it's not
him?
the same Tobey Maguire that is taken. So Tobey Maguire was taken when he's old, and Green Goblin's taken when Tobey Maguire was young. So it's not the young Tobey Maguire that is taken with Green Goblin, it's another one.
Okay,
so it wouldn't be
when
the same,
Tobey
it
goes
wouldn't
back
be the
there.
same one.
okay.
The Norman's alive still. Then how's that going to affect the
Oh, is
way
that
he
what
Spider-Man?
happens?
What do you mean?
Will Norman Osborn still be
So
alive?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Toby
well,
goes back.
Toby.
But
So how does
it
that?
wouldn't affect the Tobey Maguire that got pulled to this universe, it would affect the younger one from when Green Goblin was there. Because he would have already gone through what he'd gone through, the old one. In my opinion, that's how it would go. Because I think I've seen another film where
Okay.
they did something similar like that, and it went a time travel film, maybe. I can't
Or
remember.
again, because there's yeah, like I know what you mean.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
like
No, that was me thinking out loud. Tom.
and
That was
the
what
fact
it
that
was.
whatever, yeah, with the time travel thing, like even the whole like.
This is the
He's already
sorry to
experienced-
interrupt, Tom. This is the problem with the bloody multiverse.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
We
you're
don't
always
know
gonna have
what
these problems.
happens.
You're
And-
always going to have these problems, no matter what you do, what multiverse film you do.
Yeah, it is a bad point, but it's also like the saving point of all of this is the fact that with something like the multiverse, they can show you what they need and just miss out all the rest because they just know you're gonna get tied up.
Yeah.
Because it's like that. The easiest way of literally just being like every answer's fine is that they both get to go back, and it's literally that's when it splits, like with the whole timeline thing of any decision. So you go back and you kill whoever. It doesn't mean that the reality you came from changes. That reality carries
Affects.
on.
Okay.
And you
affects
start
that
on
person's
the
future.
So maybe like
It was Endgame that explained it.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with it. No, that was me thinking out loud because I was just.
yeah.
Endgame explained that even if you take a stone out of one timeline,
It doesn't affect what's happened
it
previously.
doesn't affect what's already happened
Yeah.
in another timeline.
Okay.
So
I'm with you.
the fact that they're not from the same timeline, the Tobey Maguire and the Green Goblin, they are from the same world but not the same time.
Yeah.
So they go back to their own points in time, and it plays out differently for Green Goblin. The same for Tobey Maguire.
No, that's fair. Yeah.
Oh. Question. Does anyone else think the film makes Doctor Strange look a little bit weak?
Yes.
Absolutely, the whole thing. Like, oh, Ned can just do magic. It's that easy.
Yeah,
Don't
Doctor
get me
Strange was learning.
That was
in his
brilliant.
own film, he goes
Yeah.
a life and death situation to be able to do that.
Yep.
And then Ned
Yeah,
can
just
just
does
do
it for a
it.
laugh.
I do,
Does it-
I do.
Don't get me wrong. It was an exciting way to introduce Andrew Garfield,
Yeah.
which I enjoyed it at the time. But then when you think you like exactly like you two just said, it makes it Doctor Strange look so weak for being the Sorcerer Supreme.
And also then an underwhelming way to then carry on.
Brilliant.
The fact that then they
So
use the
they-
same thing to yeah.
I like that he's not in the film much, but they should have wrote it a little better.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought, especially with it, like I hated the cheesy line he came out with I got it, but it's like, and it's fine if they wanted to go down that
This is
route,
totally
but I just
yeah.
wanted to. I feel like he needs my help or something.
Yeah.
And it's like fine if that's what you want to do, but especially the characters they set up, I don't know if I wanted either decision that they made for them, but they went for that decision. So for Andrew Garfield's dark turn that he clearly took, he's been taken into this universe. They find him in like an alley. He's ready to go. He is Spider-Man.
Yeah, he's
And it's like-
searching
and it's like-
for them.
But yeah, you think about it, it's like, but you think about the life he then goes into and sort of hints at, it's like, that's literally his life now. Like he's got, yes, it takes this movie for him to realise, okay, there could be more, but like, he's got to that point where he's like, yeah, this is what I am. Probably a really good Spider-Man because
Yeah.
I've been well rounded by all these awful events and stuff. But
His
I'm
fault,
also just
sort of
getting, I'm
the-
also spiralling into this sort of identity of just being that. Whereas like Toby looks like I'm ready to go, and yeah, the whole suit under his clothes was effective. We want to do a suit reveal.
Yeah.
Fair enough, whatever, you're making that choice. But it also made a bit more sense into thinking wherever he's at, because he didn't go into it till a bit later at the lab scene. If he's sort of in a happy family, or if he's just literally a dude on his own, he's basically at a point where he's stable, where his balance between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. He's not put on the suit yet. He's ready to go at a moment's notice, but he's happy in himself.
Yeah.
Matt, were you so happy? If he literally just knocked on there's a knock on the door after MJ just goes, no, pack it in.
Yeah.
We don't know what we're doing. Because she's actually been shown to be like this one who's sort of a bit of more of a voice of reason and comes out with these ideas. And there's just a knock on the door or something, and Toby's just like he literally was tracking them down.
Yeah,
so that Andrew like
best
trying to figure stuff out.
Well, that was going to lead to my question on that. Were you happy with Tobey Maguire's introduction?
I think that what you just said, I've not seen a problem with it, because he's the portal thing just goes straight to where he is. So he could have literally, you don't know, he could have just been walking out at that point. He could have just, because he's obviously like, he doesn't show him what he's done when he enters the universe. He might have been trying to figure stuff out, but at that point he could have just been stood there. Yeah. So you just don't know. But you can't have showing him walking around, because then it ruins the reveal. So
yeah.
I don't know. I'm happy with it.
Yeah. No fair.
Well, it's just it's nice to know that they just tried, and with the treatment of the both of them, it was understated compared to what I think either the excitement for some people or the fear for others.
Yeah.
That it was just going to be a story just about them.
Yeah. Another point. Daredevil, Matt Murdock.
Best thing in the film.
I did love that.
How
of course
hype was that moment? Oh my god, that was. And there are fantastic moments in the film, like we've mentioned. Like the film is brilliant for moments, but that was the only moment where I've genuinely surprised by. Well, surprised by. I knew he was going to be in it. I just don't know how.
I saw the leaks, but I just didn't believe
Thing is, well, Kevin Feige talked about in an interview, Charlie Cox is going to play Daredevil when, if, but, and you're like, yeah, cheers Kevin, you tool.
I didn't see that. So.
But it was the genuine only moment in the film where I jumped out of my seat.
Yeah,
I grabbed Alice and went, oh my god, and just started shaking uncontrollably.
I think we both agree he's our favourite MCU character.
Oh my god.
There's Netflix shows.
But I was going to say, that's thanks to the Netflix shows that was released.
So the fact that he's actually now in the MCU, that was the biggest thing for me. It's like, yes, he's here.
They didn't want him when they're at their peak.
The thing is though,
they thought the tone was too dark. Like you see, it actually works sometimes.
Yeah. You could argue, and people can argue, that potentially it was quick to introduce Daredevil and Kingpin on the same day.
That was the whole thing of like, I've always had this thing for years where it's just like the whole opening day, I get it, and especially then spoilers, if it's just a case of I want to avoid spoilers, let's go watch it as soon as possible. But the fact is I was watching Hawkeye, which again wasn't crazy invested in, I just knew I was going to watch it.
Yeah.
And they're saying stuff in that, there was a conversation between Kate and Yelena where they mentioned the new look Statue of Liberty, and I was like, well, that's in something. And I just assumed it was No Way Home because it was literally like it's referencing something specific.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the episode, Kingpin, I'm just like, I knew Daredevil was going to be in it, but I just took that edge off where it's like, unless you watch it on opening day, that's lost. So I'm thinking, the more they avoid that, the better. But I know they're not, because it's their whole. It's the whole back
before Hawkeye.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I also did. I watched.
Well, you were watching that.
I know you were watching Hawkeye.
I was sat there watching it, thinking, oh, I really want to say Daredevil in this film. I really want to say it. I really want to say it. But no, to be fair, if the storyline that they chose to go with, I'm happy with his involvement. I don't think he could have been in it anymore.
As much as I didn't want a glimpse for some other characters, like a glimpse for that in the context of the story, fine.
Yeah, just to know.
Different story. He could have literally, especially with how and again, especially how a lot of the audience still wouldn't have watched the Raimi trilogy or Amazing Spider-Man, they still could have gone with something like this in the right frame, is the fact that Daredevil could have easily filled the role that, not necessarily like Toby and Andrew, but Andrew with the whole, they tried to just say, oh, he went through a bit of a dilemma, which is believable.
It comes down to the point I made towards the very start of this video about the story. The story could have been different and still with the same outcome. You could have used Daredevil as that mentor character to take him through, because the show is so dark, the tone is so dark, and people have seen how it affects someone.
That would have made sense.
You could have used him for that as well.
If it was like the stripped back story with
it
street level, and even if something like
but it would have been a more
all that sort of stuff.
It would have been a darker tone to the film, which I think could have been a nice change. Could have.
I think it was darker than previous.
I agree. I completely agree. And it would have been, give it a more, I don't know, sort of down to earth sort of view on it, and actually that being a superhero isn't all about just glitz and glam and the big names and being there. That's why I like the ending so much, because it was Peter Parker on his own in an apartment, sewing his own bloody.
They've realised they finally get to this point, and they're just like they can.
Yeah. Which was nice, and I love that stripped back sort of Peter Parker.
Yeah,
that's
what I loved about that ending, is terms of the possibilities. It seems daft when you're saying it, because you'd think all the possibilities would be when it was really big.
Yeah.
But obviously that's when they narrow things down, like we're talking about the ceiling of all this stuff that they're trying to cram too much in. The fact that they've stripped it down to like the bare bones of what it is. You could take a movie where basically there's only a few characters in it.
Yeah.
Him, Daredevil, someone else, a villain.
Yeah.
And it would feel massive.
Yes.
Whereas 100%. And I'd say it's mainly my problem with Eternals, but it's touching it on this, where it's like he took something so big and it comes across feeling kind of small.
Yeah.
And it could have been so much different.
Yeah. I mean, I've covered all my points. Anything else to add?
Don't I just feel like, just character-wise, J. Jonah Jameson was just put there for the sake of it. Because I like the way they teased him at the end of Far From Home.
Yeah.
But then having him not, I get obviously more modern times, papers aren't really a thing, but having him out as this sort of reporter in this, it just didn't seem to fit right for me.
I
felt like it was
mind. Yeah.
But
it really didn't work in my head at all.
The reason I thought it worked for me is because it just constantly shows that the world knows who Spider-Man is, and he's always putting that pressure on Tom wherever he's going. He's always got Jonah Jameson.
Well, I was just about to say that I enjoyed the fact that he was there to apply that pressure to Spider-Man. The constant fact that he was never going to go away, even when he feels like he's doing something good. He's always painted out to be the bad guy. Yeah. He's always got his face somewhere and someone trying to drag his name through the mud. That's why I enjoyed it. Yeah,
and that's why the greatest bit.
Interested how everyone
it's weird. Like the greatest bit was the one, and again it was really drastically different. Like the way it all looked. Like I've not seen something like that in any of the MCU films. So after May, it cuts straight into his latest report outside the hotel, the apartment complex, and he's literally, and Spider-Man's, of course it's cliched, but he's bloody in the rain, and it's just like all these sort of like city lights on him, and then he's just watching this big massive sort of report of him like staring down at him, and that was the best J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
I loved that, but it's weird because as much as I didn't like the others, that was just personal preference of his introduction. It's not I didn't want him in there, but it's just I wasn't bothered by what he added to it.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, they made that better.
What they've done?
They made that appearance.
What Spider-Man? What Marvel have done with Spider-Man No Way Home? Have you played the video game?
No, I just knew about like May and
what they've done is because that was so successful. The storyline was brilliant, and the people raved about it. What they've tried to do now, sort of incorporate those ideas into the MCU because they were successful. And I think with the J. Jonah Jameson, they've incorporated the electronic version to copy or to mirror the video game. As I've said previously, the end swinging scene mirrors the video game,
Oh, it's literally.
and it's just moments throughout which are brilliant.
Comic covers and like
Exactly, yeah, exactly that.
That was like the shivers, I think, for everyone, whether you had a reference point or not. Oh, it was just so cool.
I agree.
I think the opening scene with Joe Jameson was really cool as well. Do you know when they did the opening Marvel credits, but they don't play the Marvel theme song, they have his voice in the background talking about
Yes.
So it's just
okay.
and it just gets louder and louder and louder until
Yes.
the point where it comes to, it literally starts at the point from where the credits finishes. I just thought that was so good.
No, I agree with it. And I say this quite a lot, probably said it to you, I hate it when Marvel films don't start with the Marvel soundtrack when the Marvel comes up, but that I thought was a brilliant way to start the film.
Really well.
100%.
And yeah, because regardless of whether they did it in the intro bit or not, I was desperate for it to just basically pick up exactly where it left off.
Yeah. And yeah. It pains me to say I did want it to be longer. I did want the story to be about sort of him on the run, him not being able to be himself or be Peter Parker.
But even with the story they went with,
yeah,
if they were brave, they could have gone for a longer film.
They could have developed on that point more and reintroduced Mysterio and reintroduced Kraven, so to speak, and even Scorpion, for example, who was teased in the first one.
Yeah.
There are still those possibilities. You could have introduced Daredevil, Kingpin. You could have introduced in this film as well, because you don't need to explain him. He is a big villain that is associated with Spider-Man a lot of the time, as well as Daredevil.
Yeah.
So it would have been a brilliant time to do both. But I just found one that was a little bit confusing. But the ending I was happy with.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Just to bring another point in, just
Oh.
because it was one of the
Rough again.
main things with it. It just, after that first 20 minutes, it felt like watching a pantomime for an hour, like with the performances on people. That was a big problem.
The main panto.
That's how they feel in their own
Reference.
films, though.
Yeah, I know, but it really just rubbed me up the wrong way. That did completely. Like
It
Alfred
was-
Molina and Jamie Foxx. Gosh, get in the bin. I hated it.
But
I
it's,
hate
the difference is like what I was saying about Marvel in general is when they keep to a certain direction they're going, fair enough. And when they depart from it, you just go, it's like jar and everyone jumps from
Even
it.
like all of a sudden, like Peter and
I'm
the spell.
defending what you're saying. Though.
Okay.
Carry on.
No, Tom!
Just even in the bit like that spell bit, then was just an absolute cluster. It was like, what am I watching here? I
I
just
thought
hated
the
it.
performances were consistent with the films they came from, basically. So if you have a problem with Electro's performances, you have a problem with Amazing Spider-Man 2.
And you do.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
I
hate
what I'd
it.
assume.
I don't know.
I don't like.
I don't know anyone that enjoyed Electro's performance in Spider-Man 2.
And it's
To me,
And it followed on into this one.
I basically think it's what you're saying. It's like it's when it goes against it, or it's when it goes against it and you like a certain bit of it and then goes back to it. It's when it flips, because it's like, so Green Goblin is a big one. It's probably the only one to make it relatable to everyone. The majority of that was what we expected. Like yeah, they do the whole. As soon as they did it, it wasn't that surprising. But when you're mainly just seeing Norman, or what's getting presented as Norman,
Yeah.
and he's almost sort of like downtrodden. You're going through that, and that's all you've got. But you just know the other option to that is Goblin. You know you're waiting for that. So then obviously when you got that, there was that satisfaction to that. And it's the only thing I'm going to say about that, because I could just gush about it for ages. But the Spidey sense scene.
So good. The
It's one of the
whole
best bits,
hallway scene, the fight scene. Was
Yeah, and then coming into the fight scene, like one of the greatest Goblin moments is when Spidey's got a Black Widow move on him, his legs are wrapped around his neck, and he's just punching his forehead, and he's just getting bloody, and he's just smiling and laughing at him.
That was like Heath Ledger's Joker vibes.
I was literally just about to say that.
Yeah.
Literally.
I loved it.
And that's why I don't know if was it something Willem Dafoe said, or it was something people have said where they were just like, oh, he's basically built on what he's already done. he's not just recreating the same character, which I think the rest of them were.
Yes.
William Dafoe said he wouldn't come back unless he had full-blown action sequences.
Yeah.
That he didn't have in the first one.
I agree with what you just
And I
said.
think that's
He's
just
not. He's come back resembling the same Green Goblin, but he's actually, it seems, a lot darker and more sinister.
He can just do a lot.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. And it's sort of like Heath Ledger's Joker
Taking
vibes.
away the mask as well, you can
Yes.
see his performance.
Yes,
Yeah, exactly.
it's so good.
And given their due, like, I think it's just basically I think that just comes down to
shit.
I think that just comes down to it's just it was a predictable option.
No, just wear some goggles.
Everyone knew that we were going to just do
I
like
like his sun goggles, leave him alone.
What do you prefer the mask?
I actually didn't quite. I thought it was quite that look though, because it looked daft.
I'm quite happy he smashed it.
I thought he was going to react. I
was
thought he was
so
going to react to the when May got in with the she jabbed him with the needle. I thought it was going to be some reaction.
What was that
he
needle
was
supposed to do? I forgot.
I thought,
Killed him.
but
Because he killed him at the end of the needle.
yeah.
Aqua didn't cure him then, or did he not inject it?
Well,
You need to kill us somehow, didn't I?
but basically, like, I wish you'd have got him then.
That was too
That's
much.
strange.
As well, it was just like,
But
oh
he'd
yeah.
already planned it. And
That was wrong as well.
We'll put off the whole Uncle Ben bit for 2 movies because it's not necessary anymore. It's all fine, and then what we do?
you're
And you can imagine what we're writing. They can't just like, lads, I've got it. We kill May instead.
And she can say those lines.
Oh, you can see him all just go, oh yeah, genius. It's like, oh shut up.
Well,
Didn't
I
say
felt like
shit again.
the emotional weight was there because you built up with
Yeah, I agree 100%. Instead of doing it in the first film, second, I agree with that.
With Ben, I didn't feel anything.
No one did. I don't think anyone
It's
did.
just like, oh, they're just.
It was when he took a bullet. Like, I was just on this sort of like thing where I wasn't reacting. I was actually like in it enough. The one bit that did pull me out of it was what my whole point was. But we're talking about this now. I was just sort of on that peak of where you got to, and then it's when I did genuinely just giggle when Happy was like pushed down onto the like car, and he just sort of squealed out or like run, just because of the way it sounded.
Yeah.
But it actually sounded kind of natural when you think about it, because if you're getting pushed down, yeah, of course it would.
It's not going to
But
be
then he
proper throaty.
literally just takes a bullet then, and I'm like, that was literally like, I think where like all the emotions just went haywire. Because
Then I feel Manny's death was a little bit too long.
Yes.
oh, it's because you knew it.
But rather than just didn't kill her, to be honest. But
It's because you knew it.
yeah.
I was
I
happy
feel-
with her death, but it did take
I feel like we've mentioned it with everything that had happened.
What else was it?
He need with the story that developed, that he had to lose someone, whether that be one of his friends.
I said that when you
or,
got back.
Yeah,
I just go. I just said to James, I was like, "Who's he going to lose then?"
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
said like,
had
it's
to
He
be.
could pick this
Yeah,
one.
that's right.
I predicted it would be made for. It's easy to say, but I did say to someone, one of my friends,
Yeah.
I think Hayes going to die in this film.
Yeah, and he had to. Everyone does at some point. One of the headline Marvel characters, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. The three that have trilogies have all lost someone at some point,
Yeah.
and it was Spider-Man's turn. 'Cause he's had a quite.
I like the stakes of it though.
Yeah. No, I
It
agree.
makes Green Goblin feel more threatening.
Yeah.
I agree with
That's
that.
what
yes.
comes back to my whole thing about the image of what they present in terms of the consistent performances. It's like, yeah, if he was literally Panto Green Goblin for the whole thing, probably wouldn't have bat an eyelid. But there was the little bit of the build up to that, like the fight and everything like that. So literally that whole fight through the floors, everything right to that scene. It's quite sort of scaled it back. It went no, scaled it back. It almost made it more intimidating. It was
Yeah.
actually genuinely bigger, deeper, darker than it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Which is fine, and I get that can still be consistent. But then it's this movement that I've got in that, and it's this picture in my head. And again, two completely opposite pictures. I've got the picture where I'm like, that's Green Goblin, where he's getting punched and just laughing, and then the other one that's ingrained in my mind is like the opposite of that almost. Is it's all happened, but then it glances back up to him for him to say something that doesn't really have much weight to it. It's just a bit of a cheap sort of throwaway sort of comment about what he's done. And he just sort of like, he does the smile, but he sort of just this like sweeping sort of motion. And again, it's just this real personal thing that it's not basically saying this was a bad move. It's just saying that it completely wrenched me out of that for that weird moment.
Yeah.
And it just twisted me off the side. It was literally just this cheesy, just like, again, panto. That's all I can describe it as, panto villain.
I think that's timing as well. From what you said, it's the timing of those cheese moments. Like Marvel have cheese moments constantly, which are good, funny sometimes. But with that, the timing of it was poor, especially with the moment that was happening on screen.
Yeah, the Raimi films are campy though, so, but I didn't notice it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. That's what.
Well, he didn't have a cloak in the Raimi ones, did he?
No.
That's why he did.
I've said about this and terms, so like a couple of my big main problems always come back to things like that, where that's a little specific detail, but in general, I'm looking at things where, yeah, personally, they made me feel such and such, but is this taken away from the film? Weirdly, probably not. And they can be some of my bigger problems, some of my smaller problems. Yeah, they're problems with the film. But
yeah, that's what the things I have with this film are smaller problems for me. It might be bigger problems for James or Glenn, but yeah, that's why it doesn't detract from the film for me, and I still think it's a great film.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it. There are a lot more positives for me than negatives, but the main negative was the multiverse storyline. I didn't agree with what they introduced now. I felt they could have gone around it better, which detracted from the film quite a lot for me, as well as Lizard and Sandman. I mean, I've already voiced my opinions on it, but I did enjoy the film. The moments that were in it were amazing. I loved a good. I think I loved all the parts where all the Spider-Man were together, just because of it was brilliant.
That's it. Love that. Probably my favourite line in the whole thing.
But things like that, there are more positives and negatives for me.
I wouldn't. It's one of those. I'm not rushing back to go watch it again, sort of thing. Like I've seen it. I'll be one of those. I admittedly went in. I knew from the trailer I wasn't gonna like it.
Yeah.
I knew that because I didn't want to see those villains again. For me personally.
Yeah.
I wanted something different. So yeah. Think of me what you will with that. I'll just set in my ways with it. All right, that's it.
I respect it.
It was one of those. It's like after that first 20 minutes, then I did literally spend that whole hour or so, whatever, till like Andrew and that turned up, going. But
the difference was you did that in your head after that. First 20 minutes, you did it out loud. The first 20 minutes were excruciating.
Yeah, I know.
Because I was sat between you and a beloved friend who likes the Raimi trilogy. I'm in the worst position. I should have gone on my own.
Yeah, I did say it, Tom. I did say.
So, yeah, and then, I mean, I wasn't expecting to like the dynamic of the three together. But it worked really well, like, it really did.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was another, like, first 20 minutes in that bit, loved it.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I weren't keen on the big fight, to be honest. That just felt a bit weak.
I felt that was Lizard's purpose in it. Just a scrap.
I like how the end left
more
more
from the Spider-Man fight as well, because you've got so much room to go in it, and you can never fit.
Just getting that bit out of the way to have the Green Goblin bit.
Yeah, 100%.
Which did pay off for me. But.
Yeah, and it comes back to the first fight when it all kicks off. It's fighting, and it's actually a lot of it. You could tell when it was actually done. They were actually fighting.
Yeah.
So then, of course, the big CGI fight in the middle. Of course, that doesn't hit as hard. It's just.
It's hard to follow which Spider-Man's which as well, because it's constantly moving.
That's different.
Which one's which? Right. You've said Peter 1, Peter 2, 3, but like, you can't actually sit.
Yeah.
And also, where does your Spidey sense go when you're doing a big stare at each other? Because someone's just going to get knifed in the back apparently.
There was 3 Spider-Men there and they didn't.
Oh, I'm going to hold the glider up to stop Tom from smashing his head in. But suddenly I ain't got my own Spidey sense to stop me getting stabbed in the back.
All of that. As much as I'm, yeah, it's bad.
It's bad because we've talked up the Spidey sense scene, saying it's bloody brilliant.
Yeah, and then it just weren't
And
even
it's-
there. at
that's
the
what
end,
I mean.
like,
It's
the
the
bit where
Spidey
you
sense
think-
has become this brilliant power that he has, where he detects anything and everything. Whereas there's three of them stood
Because
there.
he's not focused.
Did he need to be focused? 'Cause he wasn't focused when he
Yeah,
detected.
in the apartment scene, he wasn't really doing anything. He wasn't concentrating on anything. He was just walking around.
No, he started off. That's when he was trying to fix everyone.
Yeah.
So he walked in, then he stopped because Green Goblin
Yeah,
was walking.
he's not
around.
exactly putting his effort into anything else, is he really? Whereas in that end scene, they kind of are.
Oh, I feel
Yeah,
like
the
that's
emotions are clouding it, maybe.
Yeah, to be fair, I think this is where it comes through with like, I think they've done it more specifically, they did it gradually in Far From Home and then they've focused on it quite a lot in this, because people were basically fairly outspoken about Spider-Man's introduction and just been like, it's like he hasn't got this power, this power, this power.
Yeah, the film's there to introduce that.
And then you look back and you think, even if that was a mistake, they've done this trilogy to be like, oh yeah, of course, because when he's just starting off, he's a kid and he's probably he's got all these like superpowers, like he's not going to be focused on this, that and the other, he's not going to be utilising his best abilities. Fair enough, you can just push that aside. So it gets to that point. But yeah, this one, in terms of the other Spider-Man, be it Toby, Andrew, it's like, yeah, they've built Tom Holland's up. And yeah, just as much as I stand by that decision, of the fact that they didn't put the attention on them, they put the attention on Tom Holland's, it was like, also, you did sort of market this to try and attach all the people that really wanted these to be these amazing characters. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. I'm not sure if there's anything else for us to say.
I mean, we could.
It's been a
We're not
we
gonna-
could. It's been a long video. There probably are bits that we've missed, but I feel like we've covered a lot of bases.
Like one of the best shots in all of the MCU films, but this film, just happy, just sat with his snoring mask on.
Yeah.
Oh, love that. They mirrored it the same when like Andrew was like hanging off the ceiling, and it was this weird shot where he was just in the corner of the screen, sort of thing. Oh,
Right. So, mixed opinions, as you probably could have expected from the title, especially from James.
But it's
I didn't like it. Right? That's it. I didn't like it.
it's properly like solidified it as my number 4.
Yeah.
That's what it was on my list
Yeah.
in the previous video.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still number
Yeah.
7 for me. 7 out of 8.
Mine-
Staying there.
I mean, if you've watched the last video, mine's ever changing. I've still changed it about 7 times since that.
Mine's second,
Yeah, nice.
so it'll stay second.
Yeah. And again, this is what we've made the channel for, to have these discussions, have these views and opinions on specific topics. So, as we are moving forward with our videos, and Tom's fiddling with that, which
Yeah.
is not distracting at all, our next two videos are going to be based on the best trilogy released in our opinion. And remember, this is our opinion, it's our channel, we do what we want. And then the video after that will be based on television versus film. A conversation that I'm quite excited to have, and comparisons, and that'll be the next two videos coming up. Remember, we have a website which will be linked at the end of this video, and an Instagram as well. Please feel free to look at them. Anything to add, gentlemen?
No?
No, I'm gonna swing out of here.
Oh, that's good. That was good.
How long
Yeah.
are you thinking of that?
He's been waiting for that for the whole video.
Yeah, and that's what I come up with.
Right, we've been Lost the Plot. Thank you for watching, or again, accidentally clicking on this video, this next review. Cheers, guys. See you in the next one. Au revoir.
Goodbye.